Small towns were once the core of North America, and churches literally stood in their centers. Decades of population and economic shifts, combined with practical changes, have taken their toll. Rural regions and the churches that bind them now find themselves in unfamiliar territory. While so much has changed, the need for local bodies of Christ is as important as it has ever been.
But if rural North America has changed, what does it look like for the rural church to experience renewal? It will begin with rediscovering the mission at the heart of the gospel, where God sends Jesus to minister to the small towns of Galilee, and Jesus sends his church to the whole world. It will be driven by visionary pastors and lay leaders who take risks and try new approaches to reach those who have no church home.
Rural Renewal Summit is a 2-day digital event happening April 21st and 22nd that will introduce you to other ministry leaders serving in small towns and rural contexts to provide examples and inspiration for being the church and addressing the needs unique to your community.
At the Rural Renewal Summit, you will meet other small town church leaders who understand the struggles you are facing. Hear stories from real-life practitioners who are forming new and different expressions of church that uniquely connect with their rural settings, and explore practical approaches to church leadership and discipleship developed by fellow rural ministry leaders.
Small town North America has changed and will keep changing. The Rural Renewal Summit will give you new hope for what God can do in your town, your church, and in the lives of the neighbors you love. Join us on April 21st and 22nd, 2023 for the summit. Find out more at freshexpressions.com/Rural Renewal Summit.
Welcome to the Rural Renewal Podcast, episode 6. We're so glad that you joined us. This is our last episode of season 1.
Yeah, this has been a lot of fun. I hope you all have enjoyed it as well. And we're definitely one of the reasons we did the podcast is that we're hoping that we'll get a chance to see some of you at the Rural Renewal Summit, which is an online event put on by Fresh Expressions, where there's going to be trainings and opportunities for y'all to learn about and share about how to do ministry.
And encourage.
How to participate in rural ministry. So whether that's certainly on a pastoral level, but also certainly on a lay leadership kind of level as well. So so hopefully we'll get to see a bunch of you there virtually for that event. That'd be great.
Yeah, and I'm going to be one of the hosts of the event, so you will definitely see me there, and I'm excited to be a part of that.
You'll see me pop in and out. I will be sort of in charge of potentially of our 3 children at the time. We're also going to be at Kathleen's brother-in-law's house. No, my brother-in-law's. My goodness, it's her brother. Yeah. Brian, we know that you're Kathleen's brother. We're going to be at Kathleen's brother's house for the event. So there'll be some cousins. I don't know. We'll see how much I'm able to be there, but I'm hoping to be there for a good portion of it.
Yeah, and there's always afterwards that you can watch it. So if you can't make it live, you can sign up and get the videos afterwards and be able to participate in that way. So Chris might be doing a lot of that.
Yeah, and there'll be a link in the description below of how to sign up if you haven't signed up already.
Yeah, definitely. So Chris, tell us about picking up the kids.
Okay, so one of the things we try to do at the beginning of the podcast each week is we talk a little bit about what's been going on in our lives. And so one of the things that happens for me, I've talked a little bit about how my undergraduate degree is in meteorology and how I have started a Facebook page originally, and now it's mostly a YouTube channel called the West River Weather Guy. And I do forecasts a couple times a week. And it's one of the things that God has kind of enabled me to do in the midst of doing rural ministry. That was my original, what I thought God was leading me to for the originally in life. That was towards a career in meteorology, which obviously is not the direction I ended up actually going in. But lo and behold, when you pastor in a small town, you get opportunities to do some of that kind of stuff. So one thing that happens, because over time, it's been going on for, I've had the page for at least 10, 11, I don't know, almost since we got moved here, a couple of years after we moved here, maybe. People recognize me and ask questions about the weather all the time. So the other day I was walking down to get the kids. We had to walk just down to the bottom of our hill, basically on our road, pick up the kids off the bus. And actually, we don't have to go down there.
No.
If they could, yeah.
But it would be another 20-minute ride.
Yeah. Basically saves some time. So, and it's good for us. It gives a nice break up to the afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, I was walking down the hill. And somebody, I see a car kind of slow down as it goes by me, which is not unusual. But they roll down the window, and you just never know what somebody might ask you. But but this day it was a question about how much rain we were going to get on the weekend. Were we going to get an inch of rain? Really going to get an inch of rain? And this was not this. This was a couple weeks ago that this happened. But so I believe I said we're not going to get quite an inch of rain, but we hit close to that. And I think we got maybe half to 3/4 of an inch of rain. So that was a win for the forecast right there, which not always. We have good friends that would tell you about the time I predicted 5 to 9 inches of snow, and they got 40 something inches of snow. So yeah, that's forecasting. I get it right about as often as the real.
Well, I think also you will freely admit when you got it wrong, and that's okay.
Yeah, meteorology is a humbling. Hopefully, pastoring is a humbling, or just being a Christian should be a humbling. Should learn to be humble and be humbled at times. Meteorology is a profession that will humble. You are going to get it wrong quite often. There you go. So.
Yeah. So our local grocery store, which is...
Oh, yeah. What's been going on in your life? Sorry, Kathleen. I should be asking these questions.
No, it's totally fine.
We have our phones here with lists of what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I'm still forgetting.
So our local grocery store, it was sold a few years ago. And so it has a new name, which
used to be an IGA.
It used to be an IGA, but it was called Clark's. Now it's the Londonderry Community Market.
It is, yes.
Okay. So, but everybody uses both names because everybody knows that that's what it is. Anyway, so they have been doing like major renovations the last 2 or 3 weeks. And every time you go in there, you never know where anything's going to be. Or if they're going to have what you're looking for. Sometimes there's cheese, sometimes there's not. So, and then you go down the aisles, and of course there's someone there that you know. So then you're joking around with a person, and you're like, "Oh, do you know where the chips are this week?" Or I don't know whatever you're looking for. So it's been quite the adventure. Topic of a lot of conversations.
When you live in a small town, you have to find things to lightly complain about. Hopefully there hasn't been a lot of real complaints. It'll be nice when the stores.
I think.
Well, yeah, I'm assuming it's going to be nice when they finish the renovation. But in the meantime, it's definitely something for the rest of us to kind of go, "Oh, can you believe I can't find anything in the store?"
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So enough of our.
That's the exciting, wonderful things.
In small town.
So we have something pretty different for you this week than we've had in the past. We did two interviews a couple of weeks ago, or back in our second episode, but we have 3 interviews. These are a little bit shorter, although they're not. They're we get into some depth with them, but these are interviews with people who do creative ministry. If you're familiar with Fresh Expressions, they do basically different kinds of Fresh Expressions ministry. Yeah. In local congregations.
And if you don't know what Fresh Expressions is, that's okay. So Fresh Expressions is basically, it's a way to encourage churches to cultivate spaces other than Sunday mornings to share about Jesus and to create community, like a Christian community. And a lot of churches do it already, but they might not call it Fresh Expressions. But the organization that is putting on this Rural Renewal podcast and the summit is called Fresh Expressions. So if you've kind of heard something about it and you're like, I'm not completely sure what this is about, now you know. And if you look in the show notes for this episode, there is a video link to give you a better idea. And you can always look at freshexpressions.com for even more information about that.
Yeah, and I would say, just as Kathleen, obviously, she's what is your actual title for them? You're a
coordinator for strategic initiatives.
There we go. This is why I can't remember your title. But so she, I would say, from my perspective, as someone who has been through some of the trainings for Fresh Expressions, been to a national conference, and kind of worked alongside with some of the stuff. One of the things for rural ministry that they do that I really appreciate about them is finding ways for the what they call the inherited church. It is sort of the traditional church, the church that meets on Sunday morning and includes it makes up most of our congregations. Ways for them to find different ways for people who are not going to be comfortable with that kind of setting. And in your rural communities, you're definitely going to have a lot of those people, but you're also going to have this sense of an inherited church oftentimes there that's made up of a core of people who really do appreciate all the things, and the organization appreciates the things that the inherited church brings to the table, while also encouraging people within an inherited church to find creative ways to share the gospel with those outside the church. So they do a lot of trainings. There's a lot of they do all sorts of stuff alongside of that, and the summit is one of those things. So that's why we're encouraging you to go, and why I think if you haven't ever seen what a fresh expression is before, watch the video. It's worth it.
I agree. So before we do that, each week we're going to give you a way you know that you have found the right podcast. So Chris, tell us this week's. Yeah.
So one of the things that is this is just true if you live in a rural area, is that if you go outside at night, particularly if you get out of your little town, village, whatever that might be, and you look up, you just get beauty of God's creation and the stars spread out over the top of you. And certainly if you've always lived in a rural area, you certainly take this for granted. But for several years, we had a group of kids from youth from Pennsylvania who used to come. They were just outside of Philadelphia. They used to come up and do a summer mission trip and mission projects in our town with our youth. And actually, we used to bring our kids down there sometimes during the winter. But anyways, as part of that, one of the things that they always loved to do, and our kids would just be amazed at how much joy they took in this, is they would often, sometimes they would often stay at the local elementary school during the summer, and they would go out at like 10 o'clock at night on a clear night, and they would all just lay down on the soccer field and like look up at the stars and just be amazed at how many stars they live in a suburban or an urban area. You see like 10 stars when you look up, but when you live in rural Vermont or many other rural places, on a clear night, you look up and you can see thousands of stars, and you can see the Milky Way. It's really amazing. So yeah, if you can look up and you can see more than 10 stars at night, or more than 30, or more than 50, or more than 100 stars at night, I think this is the podcast for you. Okay. So like I said, we have 3 different interviews for you this week. Kathleen, who is our first interview with?
Our first interview is with David Blackwell. He is the pastor of Florence Curtin Church. And they do some really innovative things, like the Cowboy Church. And I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, definitely. It's well worth a listen. So here is our interview with David Blackwell.
We're talking with David today. David, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're serving and what you're doing?
Sure. It's great to be with you guys today. My name's David Blackwell. I'm pastor at Florence Carlton Community Church in Florence, Montana. We're in the Bitterroot Valley of Montana, just south of Missoula, on the western edge, about 20 miles from Idaho, give or take. It's a beautiful place, semi-rural, I would say. There's lots of little small towns up and down the valley where we are. It's just a wonderful little spot in God's creation for us to be serving in this place. So just kind of a neat area. Florence itself is about the zip code is 4,000 people. We're unincorporated.
Okay,
we're a wide spot in the middle of the road. So yep. In between 2 slightly larger towns of about 6,000 people. So that's kind of our context and where we are.
Yeah, that's we're in southern Vermont, as many people know here, and who listeners will know. But we are we feel that as well. We're sort of in the mountains, and there's sort of towns to the west and towns to the east of us as you head down the mountains into the valleys a little bit more. But yeah, little tiny places, and it's beautiful spots to do ministry for God. We certainly it's amazing to be able to kind of walk out the door and just see God's creation spilled out in front of everyone.
Yeah. Sort of. Once you get here, you sort of take root. We've been here 18 years now.
Wow.
And, it's just
awesome.
Just a great place. I think that's one of the things that helps ministry be successful in these contexts, is when you're willing to kind of just settle in and make it your home.
Yeah.
People
Yeah, we
begin.
wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah, you guys have probably experienced that as well when you're there
absolutely.
for a while. That it takes a while to gain trust in these areas.
It does. It does.
In these contexts, and the longer you hang in there, folks get to know you and they start to embrace you.
They do. Yeah, we've definitely talked many times with people, and you're just pulling back layers as you get to know them more and more. Not that, I mean, they, over the years, in 13 years, every once in a while, I still hear a story from somebody I've known the whole time we've been here. And I'm like, oh, gives me a little bit more of an understanding of who you are and how you think about the world and how you think about your relationship with God. And it's.
Now, so what do you see as God's specific mission for your particular context?
We're, as you know, we're in this rural area, and we specifically see ourselves as a church that is looking to represent the grace of Jesus well within our context. That's a commodity in some of our areas that can be hard to come by. And so we're looking to be a very grace-centered congregation in a rural community, and that has a tremendous amount of traction for people in the best ways possible. They're looking for that, for that fresh breath of Jesus' grace. I'm not. You don't want to be negative about others, but small, in these areas, people can get sort of locked into their own way of expressing the grace of Jesus, and we try to be a little bit more open and while being faithful to the gospel.
Certainly,
being a little more open to that, as we have done some of the fresh expression stuff that we've done. Kind of our mantra has been, we don't need more churches here. We got plenty of churches, but there need to be more churches that are a little bit more graceful, and that's what we're trying to plant along the way. So.
Oh, that's great. That's and a needed reminder, I think, for all of us, right? To be willing to be gracious and to be full of grace towards those around us, and to recognize that there are people around us for whom maybe the more traditional is maybe the wrong way, but some of the ways that we've expressed grace to them in the past, if they're not hearing it, then maybe there's a different way that we can express that, and then we'll hear it and encounter Jesus for the first time.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter what we say; it's what people hear.
That is right. It's very true.
Definitely. Now, can you share with us some of your experience with fresh expressions, like your Cowboy church or dinner church? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. The Cowboy church was kind of the first thing that we did. Our executive director here, Charles Revis, awesome leader and a wonderful guy. He's the first one who said, Dave, this is a fresh expression. I didn't think of it as a fresh expression at first, but then it eventually dawned on me that in our rural contexts, which are pretty traditional and where things change more slowly, you don't have to move the needle very far to be fresh. And
very true.
And Cowboy Church was one of those things where we didn't move the needle very far. But what we were discovering was that that folks in our area already had this preconceived notion of the Sunday morning church, where you had to dress up, you had to wear a suit and tie, you had to be kneeling and standing and kneeling and standing, and that's not our Sunday morning church at all. I think there are only 4 ties in the whole place on Sunday morning. 3 of them are Bolo's and 1 is mine. So it is as laid back as it gets. But that perception, what people already think they know, was difficult. So we just decided we're going to try something on Wednesday night. It's going to be we're going to call it Cowboy Church. It's going to and as we present it to people, we're going to say no ties allowed. That's about as far as we moved the needle in terms of what we were doing, and a change in musical style. We've got a great worship guy, Dean Heitzman, who he knows every country western song written before 1974, and so he took over the music, and we just keep it simple. We sing, we pray, we preach. The warm-up music is Merle Haggard and Johnny Cash. And then the worship songs are "Will the Circle Be Unbroken" and "I Saw the Light," and it's just it's just a neat thing. And then we sing, we pray, and we preach. I sit down on it. As it has morphed over the last 10 years, they got me a milk can to sit on to preach from, because they said, we don't like it when you're standing up, Dave. Here's a milk can. It's a milk can with a tractor seat welded to the top of it, and we just have, it's more conversational than a Sunday morning for sure. Because the group is smaller, 20, mid-20s to 30 people, something like that. But it's a great gathering, but it fits the context here. It overcomes some of the barriers that we that people have built up in their own minds. It's just just saying, okay, we're just stripping that barrier out of the way, and we're going to talk about Christ. We're going to talk about the gospel and how Jesus works in you on a day-to-day basis, and it has been embraced throughout the course of the last 7-8 years. Now there's a great group of people that gather there.
Yeah. I love that the creativity there to say we don't have to completely do everything different, but just simply changing a few things and saying, this, I love the fresh expressions that come out that are way out of the box, right? Tattoo church or, kayak church. It's amazing to hear that story. But in a rural place, those things can sound, I think, awfully intimidating, perhaps. But just, hey, we're going to do a service. It's going to be pretty similar, but you're not allowed to wear a tie, and we're gonna sing some slightly different songs. That's amazing. That's so good.
Yeah, because in our rural context, people live in rural places because they are more they like the stability, they like the quiet, those things are things that mesh with their personality that God's given them. So like I said, we discovered you just don't have to move the needle very far to help them put aside their preconceived notions and open their heart to what God might want to do through that. So we did end up serving a lot of meals there for a while, pre-COVID, pre the unpleasantness. Our ladies started doing a meal every week, so it turned into it sort of gradually morphed into a dinner church in some respects because people like to eat. But post post the unpleasantness, that hasn't returned, but many of the people have. It's just it's just a thing. In fact, you don't have to move the needle very far in our rural contexts to do something fresh.
Yep. Yeah, that's a statement worth remembering, I think, for all of us. To find that the little ways we can be just a little creative to help the people that would have some preconceived notions about church feel comfortable in that setting. Really, really helpful. You talked a little bit about the meals. You're telling us a little bit before we started about how your dinner church kind of morphed through as COVID kind of had to move the needle on it. I think that's a really helpful story. So if you want to share that a little bit, that would be great.
Yes, we again, through our region, Mission Northwest, Charles introduced us to the concepts of dinner church, and we spent about a year sort of finding the people for whom that was a passion, and them getting ready to launch that. And there are others who can speak to read Verlin Posner's book. That's all you got to do to get out the dinner church, right? So we were working through all of that, and we actually launched a dinner church down in the town just south of us. The first week, our folks had no one there. It was every worker and nobody came. The second week, they had 7, and they were really excited about that. The third week, we had 14 people show up for dinner church. That was amazing. We were just like, oh my goodness, God's doing something incredible here. And then the fourth week was the middle of March 2020. And the governor of Montana shut everything down because of the unpleasantness. And, one of the things I love about our people here in this congregation in particular, they were like, okay, we can't do this. What can we do? So they started doing takeout. We had rented the senior center for dinner church in the small town in which they were based. So they just started boxing the meals, setting up in the parking lot of the senior center. They Corey Skiers, our leader, would write the message. It's just like a 1-page, 400 word, 500 word devotional, and we started doing drive-through. People would just drive through. They'd say, "How many meals do you need? And would you like a message? Can we pray for you about anything?" And then off they would go. And that happened in March of 2020, and we haven't been able to get away from it since. It's just been really fascinating to see how I think I told you guys, it's the aardvark of dinner churches. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. But people are they'll come by, and since then we've gradually gotten a small group of 7 to 10 people who will come in and sit down and sort of do the quote standard fresh expression, if you want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk about that oxymoron. But but the people who are coming to get the meals, and it's 100 every week. And they'll come by and they'll say, "Hey, can we get 6 meals or 10 meals?" And we'll hand them 6 or 10, whatever they ask for. And then they will say, "We need 10 of the messages." Because what they are doing is they are taking the meals to neighbors, and then they are sitting down together and reading the message together and discussing it within the context of their own home. It's really weird, and it's one of those things that if you're a process guy like me, and I'm not brilliant, I'm not entrepreneurial, I'm just check the box. Here's what you do. Here's how you do it. So when you're one of those check the boxes kind of guys like me, I'm sitting there asking them, "Well, how do we evaluate how effective this is?" All that kind of thing. It's just kind of you have to let go of that. And I'm sitting there going, "How do we evaluate this?" He says, Corey says, "Well, they're taking the meals and they're asking for the messages. So it must be going pretty well,
Yeah.
They're not taking the meals and using the messages as a napkin. They're actually taking them and using them. So there's something that God's doing there in the middle of all of that. So we're just, what was it? Rick Warren's words? We're just ride the wave, and we're riding the wave and seeing what God's gonna do with that down the line. So it's
I appreciate the story, because again, it kind of helps with understanding, the need to, sometimes you're going to have to need to pivot in these kind of in fresh expressions, hopefully not for reasons like we've had to over the last couple of years, but for any number of reasons. And the willingness, one of the things that's nice is we always say this about some of the things we've tried, particularly in fresh expressions kind of stuff. When you're starting something like this, there was nothing going on before. You can't break something that was already going on before, right? You try it, and sometimes stuff goes, you do see some really neat stuff happen. Sometimes you're like, man, maybe we won't try that again. And that's okay. It gives us, but just that willingness to keep pushing towards, new ideas, different ideas, and a willingness to keep trying them and keep trying to find ways that people can interact and connect with Jesus, in their own context. So it's really good.
Yeah, the people are always the project, and
they are.
And it doesn't matter if it's what the tool is at that particular moment. You just you just give it a roll and see what happens.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, David, for coming on our podcast today. I have one last question for you. How can our listeners find you online?
We FlorenceCarltonChurch.com. You can find us there, and you can find sermon illustrations. It's not the world's greatest website. It's but there are links to our Facebook page and to sermons on YouTube and things like that there, and email addresses if anybody wants to shoot an email our way. That's there as well.
All right,
great. Well, thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
So thank you so much to David for sharing that interview with us, and we hope you found it informative. So one thing we do at the end of our interviews there is we want to talk about one thing that we're each going to take away from this. And so I took away from this that people live in rural areas because they like the stability and the quiet. And David reminded us that there's a reason people tend to live in rural areas and that we should embrace those kinds of things.
I agree. And for me, I liked how he said a little change can strip some of the barriers away. And I think sometimes we feel like we need to make everything completely different or new in order to encourage people to participate. But that's not always the case.
Yeah, sometimes just a little bit of a change can make a big difference. I really appreciated that about him. Okay, so we have our next interview coming up. Kathleen, I was not available to do this interview, so Kathleen did it on her own. So Kathleen, tell us about who you're interviewing next.
The next interview is with Chris and Jaidy Smith. They're a pastoral team at Jordan Memorial UMC and La Luz de Cristo IMU. It's in North Carolina, and their ministry, they work to bridge cultural and language barriers. So without further ado, we'll listen to that interview. We're back today talking with Jaidy and Chris Smith. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself? How'd you end up doing ministry in a rural location? And what led you to doing what you're doing now?
So it was so great to be here with everybody. And so we serve within the United Methodist Church. And so we're an appointed process. So we got here because our bishop sent us here. And that's just part of our itinerary thing. But as we've served in urban settings, this is our first rural setting. And so far we have loved it. I grew up in a rural town. My wife grew up in a rural town as well. And so for us, this is really getting back to kind of the heart, because rural are their community. It's places where everybody knows each other, sometimes for better or for worse. With how well that works, people know you that you're in the grocery store, and people know you when they talk about your sermon, and you have no idea who they are because they don't go to your church, but they watched it online or something. But yeah, just following that passion for creating community, I think is what has brought us to the rural setting, and love it. We're not wanting to leave the rural setting because we believe church is community. And so being able to experience that is vital to our ministry.
And for me, it's just like going home, because that's, so I was born in Puerto Rico, and I attended a rural church there for 22 years. And so for me, it just feels like coming back home, where everybody's a family. You just feel that love and that passion to reach to others and to do more for the kingdom of God.
I like that. Now, what do you see as God's specific mission for your particular context?
Oh, great question. So within our context, so we have, we serve actually two congregations under one roof. So we have an Anglo congregation and a Hispanic Latino congregation. And part of, I think, all of our mission or ministry is, how do we get back to God's shalom? How do we get back to as it is meant to be? And so rural settings are great because we have Edens everywhere. We have rivers, we have mountains. The piece that's missing is us as people, because we tend to want to divide. We want to put this group versus that group. And so I think part of our mission is bridging cultures, bridging language, and bringing people that wouldn't normally have any reason to be together around the table to be together. And I think that's what Jesus did. And so we see that as part of our ministry as well. The rural South, of course, still has its challenges and issues. And so we find ourselves put right in the heart of that to try to help bridge those places. So that's what I see as our mission.
Mm-hmm. And I will add to that let's be honest. There's not much to do, or there's not much happening in rural communities, right? There's not like your big Starbucks to meet, or there's not all these fun places. And so for me, it's exciting to be able to create fun and meaningful and safe spaces where the community can come and gather and get to know one another and just have something to do.
That's great. Now, You have experience with fresh expressions. Can you tell us about that in your church and your community?
So gosh, we kind of started the fresh expression journey several years ago. And in a previous church, we did a soccer church. We had a Hispanic Latino congregation. We had an indoor gym that wasn't being used. And so we found, hey, kids love to play soccer. And so we partnered with community leaders that actually did the soccer programming piece of it. And so we just fell in love with that and had people coming through the gym 7 nights a week to come and play soccer. So we really fell in love with the idea that church doesn't have to be Sunday morning, rigid liturgy, all this stuff. I mean, it can be that, that's okay. But that there's this blended ecology that you can do that, but you can also do this other stuff. And so we fell in love with that. And so when we came to our setting here, we immediately started looking at what are the places that that's already happening. And so for one, we got here, we had a ladies exercise group that was mostly people from our community and mostly older, either widows or just older women that wanted connection after COVID. And so they were already meeting. And so we started putting in a little bit of a piece of a Jesus story or sharing a little bit about what's going on. And it has blossomed and grown. And so they meet twice a week. We have a walking group. So Deep River is our river that runs through this area. And there's a beautiful walking trail on it. And so we have a group that meets out there 3 times a week. And they just walk in the mornings and just share stories, share what they have going on. And so those are kind of our 2 big ones that are going. And then the rest, we're really right in that exploratory phase. We're trying to listen. And if you're listening about this for Fresh Expressions, I can't say that enough. We tend to want to jump right in and do something. And the listening piece is so important to the process. And so we have a community meal, we have AA, we have English as second language. And so we have all these things that we're excited about, but we're trying not to push too much because we want to make sure we're going to do what the community needs and not what we think the community needs. And so we're doing that piece of listening. And Jaidy has a great one that she does called Growing Together. I'll let her explain that one.
That's my what I'm excited about, Growing Together. So when we first moved to this community, I, of course, being younger, you use social media and you get to hear conversations from people in the community. And I started listening the theme of loneliness and wanting to just have women to gather and talk and just catch up and form friendships. And so I prayed. And one of the things I learned through Fresh Expressions is you listen and you use what you're passionate about. Well, I love crafting and journaling and arts. And so I thought, well, what if we just start a group of women that can meet any age? Everybody's welcome. And we get to know one another. We can share maybe a devotional and we can craft and have fun together. And it has been beautiful. It started actually last February. So it will be a year now. And it's been amazing. We've had from ages 8 to 100. And it's been beautiful to see how everybody just comes together and how they just have fun. I loved one of the older ladies. She said, I can't remember when was the last time I painted or picked up a brush. And so to see the excitement with something that seems so simple, right? Like paint or crayons or but it's been beautiful. It's been beautiful to see what God has been doing through that. And one that God has been placing in my heart and that I'm really passionate about too has to do with mental health. And this is still in the very early stages, just listening, trying to find, connect the community. It's just there's a huge need in this community for mental health awareness and health. And so what would it look like to have like some workshops and some maybe like hands-on like conversation happening? And how can the church be involved in helping the community with mental health? So I'm excited to see where God is going to lead us through that.
I think one of the challenges you run into in rural settings is because it's so small, because everybody knows each other, there's heavy expectations on how you're supposed to be. And so you put up this facade of trying to do perfect. And so when you fall short, you fall that much harder. And so we really learned that it's trying just to create space where we remind folks that God loves you as you are, and that creating safe places to come in and just experience what that looks like. One of the things that she didn't mention, part of growing together that's neat, is that's one of our cultural bridges. That's where we've seen Spanish and English coming together and crossing cultural boundaries. And the part of growing together is growing together in stuff that's outside our comfort zones. And that's been a beautiful piece to see as it's played out over the last year. But that's pushing us beyond those expectations we have.
Mm-hmm. No, I love that. And I love I think it's a good reminder to us about listening, because I think we like to jump into new things and try new things. And that's not a bad thing, but sometimes it's good to take our time and especially in rural areas, I feel like taking your time is a good thing. Because if you try to jump in too quickly, people become suspicious of that as well. So I think that's great. Mm-hmm. Let's see. Now I have a question for you individually. What is one spiritual practice that you have found meaningful for your own faith journey?
I'll start. So I love journaling. And one of the things I discovered, and I have to admit, in one of my hardest times in life, was Bible journaling. And so I have picked up Bible journaling, and it's been amazing to be able to not only study scripture, to dig deeper, but also to draw something, to paint something that relates to that verse and how God is speaking to me through that verse. And so it has helped me tremendously in my spiritual journey and my spiritual walk, and just being able to not only read scripture, but let it sink in by what I'm drawing or what I'm painting. So that's one of my favorites.
I love it.
As for me, I think I have kind of like two that have really hit. I mean, the one I've always fallen back to is I've always had a passion for music. If I would have studied as hard in undergrad as I did playing instruments, I might could have gotten out in faster than 4 years. But I love to sit down with my guitar, sit down at a piano, and just play. Nothing specific, just to let Holy Spirit creativity come and do. And then my other thing is I'm just a nerd. I love learning. And so podcast videos, I'm on a Hebrew kick right now, so I'm trying to teach myself Hebrew. Some days I get better than others. But I think, just being filled by learning something new is a spiritual discipline for me.
That's great. So do you have any way that listeners can connect with you online? Either one of you?
So me, on Instagram, it's Jaidy, JAIDYPR. And I post a bit of everything there. Also on Facebook, you can find me with my name, Jaidy Smith. And then you.
And so for us, I mean, we have a church website that we put everything to. So it's www.jordanmemorial.org. And so you can find all of our events we have going on are posted there. And then for our Hispanic church, La Luz de Cristo, they have a Facebook page that keeps their stuff going. And we broadcast all of those services and Bible studies live. So fun if you want to learn some Spanish or get into some bilingual worship, we would definitely invite you to join us online for those.
And I would say stay tuned, because I'm about to open a YouTube channel.
Oh, that's exciting. Definitely exciting. Well, thank you for sharing with us today. We really appreciate you taking time to talk to us. And thank you.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you so much to Chris and Jaidy for sharing in the interview with us there. And so, Kathleen, what was your takeaway from that interview?
Church doesn't have to be Sunday morning.
We definitely, I think, get stuck in that mindset very quickly. For those of us who have been, who grew up in church and things like that, and many of our rural people. But it's great to think about how church can just outside of that. Definitely. Okay. And so we still have one more interview with you. Kathleen, who's our last interview with?
Allen Jessee. He is the lead pastor of Highlands Fellowship in Southwest Virginia. And this is a unique church because it's a multi-site rural church doing some creative ministry, partnering with local organizations.
Yeah, and it's good to remember that all sorts of different, the church kind of functions and looks all sorts of different ways in different rural areas. And we appreciated Allen for being able to share with us in some of the ways that multi-site thing is working in his area and some of the neat things that they're doing there.
We'd like to welcome Allen Jessee today to our podcast. Allen, tell us a little bit about yourself. How did you end up doing ministry in a rural location, and what led you to what you are doing now?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Southwest Virginia, which is sort of in the middle of nowhere, and just had a great upbringing in the church. And when I went to college, I decided I needed some extra income. And so the church I grew up in offered me a part-time position to do youth ministry, and started there all the way back in 1983. If you can believe it, it's my 40th year in ministry.
So I did that. That's amazing.
Yeah, did that for a couple of years, and then we actually planted a church, and I was there for 25 years in a church plant that several years ago spawned off a fresh expression, and it's doing great. It's its own church now. And then for the last 12 years, I've been at a church called Highlands Fellowship, which is more of a multi-site church, still in a rural area. But it's been a great place. And we've had a couple of fresh expressions that have started from that church as well. 5 kids, been married to Brenda for a long, long time. We call them 2 homemade kids. So our oldest 2, Martha and Joseph, and then 3 heart-made. We adopted 2 from Ethiopia and 1 through our local foster care system. And he's 13, so I'm far from an empty nester, I'm afraid.
Well, that's right. We have a 13-year-old daughter. We have 3 kids. They're all, I guess you would say, natural made, or your term for it was. But so you grew up in Southwestern Virginia, though,
Yes.
near where you pastor now.
Yes, I've been here my whole entire life, exception for seminary days, but the whole time here.
That's great. We definitely we went to seminary in the Northeast, and we grew up in the Northeast and felt very called, geographically called to the Northeast as well. So I just definitely understand that sense of a call to the people that you grew up with. Really,
yes,
absolutely, fun way to do ministry.
Yes.
Now, what do you see as God's specific mission for your particular context?
Yeah, for us, we just sort of look at the life of Jesus, and we want people to experience life with him. We feel like we're people of truth and love, so we're going to teach the scripture, and we're going to do it in a loving way. We want to be a place to belong. We call church I'm at now, it's Highlands. We call Highlands home. And then we want to be a church on purpose. And so that's sort of the missionally who we are, and visionally who we are. Our vision would be to transform people and places through Jesus. So we believe that when you look at how Jesus called his disciples, they were transformed because of the love of Jesus, and then they went and they transformed places. So that's sort of our context of mission and vision of where we are.
Yeah, that's great to hear. And so multi-site in a rural location, that's definitely a little different than a lot of ministry models. How does that work in a rural setting? I mean, obviously, I think we're more familiar with that in more of a suburban kind of or urban kind of setting.
Right. Well, we are. We have 2 larger locations. Sort of the original site is in a historical town, Southwest Virginia, called Abingdon, Virginia. And honestly, it was the first church that was a little bit different than probably traditional church. So 26 years old. And it just was the right season for something new and something different. They started in a high school. The founding pastor just had a tremendous vision. And it grew so fast, so quick, that they launched a second site with about 400 people in Bristol. and it's still going really strong. And then the next site was in a small town along the interstate, rural town called Marion, and it was a church building that was given to us that sort of went out of existence. And so we took that facility and rebranded it, if you will. And today it probably has, 150 people that would call. And then we have another location in Johnson City and one in Bluefield that meets on the university campus of Bluefield University. We use their chapel space and we sort of partner together. So we have a couple of larger campuses, and then a couple, the rest of our locations would be somewhere around 100 to 300.
Oh, that's just a fun model, a different kind of way of thinking about. Can you share with us about your experience with Fresh Expressions in your church or in your community?
Sure. What we were sort of challenged to do was think of new ways to reach people with the gospel. And just so happened that we had some young, I've always believed in raising up the next generation. We had some young guys on our team that wanted to be more than a campus pastor, which that is sort of the setting in a multi-site, and they had speaking gifts. And so we said, hey, let's go there. And one we sent to our Johnson City location and rebranded it, called it New Collective Church. And so, instead of the screen, he spoke there, and it was amazing. I mean, it's grown by leaps and bounds. And even during COVID, we took a hit, of course, but after COVID, it's come back really strong. And the other Fresh Expression that we started right before COVID, which was a bad time to start, of course, but was this guy's been a longtime friend of mine, and he's always had this. We're in the birthplace of country music here in Southwest Virginia. And so he felt like, I really believe God's called me to reach people through this avenue of country music, almost like folk country. And there was a real popular band in our area called Folk Soul Revival. That lead singer Jesus got a hold of him, and he says, I want to make myself available. And so they created a band and dissolved the other one. And Pastor Craig Barber is the pastor of it's called Simple Rhythms. And they started in the birthplace of country music, the museum. And it grew to about 100 people. And then the idea was to reach people like on a Saturday night or something like that that wouldn't come to church. So I think we started it on Sunday night. And then COVID sort of shut that down. So they went to a local wedding venue called the Barns at Chip Ridge, still that barn sort of country flavor. And then we actually had a country service at our church because it's so popular in the area. And so we started Simple Rhythms when we brought it back from COVID at 11 o'clock in that service, in that venue. And it was standing room only. He outgrew that space. And this past August, he felt like, after coaching a lot from Mike Humphrey and some of the other Fresh Expression leaders, that it was time for him to plant. And they found a great place to plant. I think they started with 500 people right out of the gate, and it's only gone up from there. I mean, it is really tremendous movement of reaching people who had sort of disenfranchised with the church, got hurt with the church. So there are several believers. We sent several believers from Highlands there, but they've reached a lot of young people and a lot of new believers in the process there. And Stum's, still sort of finding out that spiritual journey. So it's been very successful.
Yeah. It's so good to hear when people find, one of those things that kind of helps people connect. And then, when you incorporate the gospel into the stuff that people would be doing anyway. I mean, certainly I'm sure people go and are listening to music together, going places to listen to music together all the time. So if you can, if you incorporate the gospel into that, make church happen in places people already are, and to see what God does with that kind of thing, it's pretty amazing. So that's a great story. Thanks for sharing those with us. Those are really good.
Sure.
How do you think this experience has impacted your wider church mission? Having these fresh expressions.
Yeah, so what Fresh Expressions has sort of helped us do is to rethink about we're in rural Southwest Virginia, Upper East Tennessee, and we know that the communities in which we have campuses in are not what they could be. So we sort of began to think, how could we really become a church that if we shut down, the communities really would miss us, that we're not asking something from the communities, but we really desire our church to make an impact and to see communities transformed through Jesus. So we started meeting. This has been about 5 years ago now. We started meeting with a lot of our local business people and our community leaders, mayor, town council, those type things. And we just said, what are the giants in your community that are keeping you from being all that we can be? And we identified several of those. One of the biggest ones that we had here in Southwest Virginia, we have a huge opioid problem. And as a result of that, a lot of kids were being taken out of homes. We didn't have enough foster parents to care for those kids. So they were not only losing their family, but they were losing their school, their community, and they were being shipped to Northern Virginia. So we decided we're going to champion that as a church. And I think when we started this, we had maybe 8 foster families. Now we have about 70 or 80 foster families. We have tons of foster kids in our families in the church. And we work with an organization called Virginia Kids Belong that if you don't want to foster, we're going to wrap around you as foster parents and deliver meals to you or whatever, give you a night out. And the church has just embraced that to where now, if there's a child that's taken out of a family in our area, we have a foster family that has been trained and can love them. And it's a neat story. So that was one of the big things that we felt like we wanted to help, that we could help. It wasn't really that cost effective for us. It just was labor intensive, right? We had to we had to find families and get them trained and really just cast vision to help them understand the need. But we identified some other areas that are much like that the church could go into the communities, move outside the walls, and be the church in the community. And so we partner with a lot of other organizations. We don't try to be the church. We're not out there about us. We'll let them take the honor and the glory for meeting a need in the community, but we can supply. Sometimes it's resources and sometimes it's people. But I think if you were to ask our community today how they feel about the church, it would be so much better than when they felt like we were the church that wanted them to come there, wanted something from them. Now they know we're on their side. We want something for them. And our communities as a whole they're better. They truly are. And it's humbling to see, but it really is a great opportunity to go into those rural areas. And, they're smaller. So word travels fast, as you know, in small communities for sure.
Yeah, I one of the things, and certainly from talking, certainly to you here, but certainly to other people through the podcast here, one of the things I've had a sense for is the unique opportunity that rural churches, and being in a rural church ourselves, that you have is the connection to the wider community is often very natural, so when given and the opportunities to partner with other organizations and things like that in a way that is that can really make a change and a difference in a community. And that, not that can't happen in different settings as well, but I think rural churches are particularly well positioned to see that kind of ministry happen and really help their communities thrive in a way, and to bring the gospel into that and how a community can thrive. So that's the foster care thing. That's an amazing story. I'm so glad you shared that with us, because that's something really to celebrate and to cherish, because that's certainly here in I think I'm sure every rural location, that's such a consistent problem, with opioid issues going on and with kids needing a place to go and a safe place to go. So I just am excited to hear that that's happening. So
yeah, awesome. Thank you.
Our last question for you, and we like to wrap up with this question in general, is first, what is one spiritual practice that you found meaningful for you in your faith journey?
Well, for me, I love relational ministry. I'm extroverted type person, and I just love people. But I think in my life, the thing that I've been learning lately, recently, and even though I'm much older, I found you got to be a constant learner. And we've been going through a series by one of my young guys, and he just called the series "Transformational Life," and it's been amazing. And one of the disciplines that he talks about is silence and solitude. It goes back to Jesus. For a guy like me, that's sort of hard. I can talk my way out of things and talk my way into things, and so I've been trying to apply the last year just some silence, being still before the Lord, and finding those moments of solitude. We have 5 kids, and it's chaos, 2 dogs that are crazy. And, my wife works full time. I work full time. And it just seems like that's the thing that easily gets crowded out of our day. And it becomes like, well, that's not that necessary for you. But I found that if I can spend some time before the Lord, just in silence and solitude, He does speak. And, you form that relationship with Him in a deeper way. And it's been good for me.
Thank you. All right. Last thing. If people want to find you online or how can they do that?
Yeah, I don't have much of an online presence, unfortunately. Right. I'm sort of in obscurity down here in Southwest Virginia. But the church is Highlands Fellowship. So you can go to, I'm sorry, I thought I had that cut off. But you can go to hf.church and you can find some of the stuff that we do and some of the messages I've spoken. We have a teaching team. So that's about it. I'm sorry, I don't have much of a presence out there in the social media world.
I think that means you're pastor in a rural area, right? No, thank you. And certainly, I think probably going to the church website would be it's a place worth going to because the story of what's going on there is really neat to see, and I think worth people just being reminded of some of the ways that God can use churches and rural locations to impact their community. So, yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you guys so much for what you do, and maybe one day we'll meet face to face somewhere. But
yeah, definitely, it
was good getting to know you.
Yeah, it's been very good to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Thank you, Alan, for that interview. So one takeaway point that I came away from this interview with is using music as a way to connect with your community. I haven't mentioned this, I don't think, in this podcast, but my undergraduate degree was in music education. And God kind of led me in a different direction, but it's still something that I love. So I liked that point.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the things that I took away from the interview was the idea of partnering with other organizations, particularly the way they talked about how they had partnered with the foster care system at their church. And certainly something, if you find an organization in your community that is really doing something that is that you can partner with them on in terms of supporting what they're doing, that's work that is gospel kind of work, then that's how amazing is that, in the ways that your church can really make a difference, a positive difference in your community for the gospel and just for your community in a whole. So I really appreciate the way they talked about how their church had been doing that. Okay. One of the things we do at the end of each podcast as we kind of start to wrap up is we talk about something that has happened recently that reminded us we live in a rural location, or not necessarily recently, but something that might happen in a community that helps remind you live in a rural location. So this week, Kathleen, you've got something. What do you got for us?
So we have a local thrift shop. It's called...
I bet most of you have a thrift shop in in whatever town you live in. So rural or urban.
It's called the Thrifty Attic, and they do great things. They only have one person that they pay. Everybody else is volunteer, and they just use all the money that they make to support local organizations, mostly nonprofit organizations, and they like to support things that are not part of the regular budget. So our church has benefited from this. Like one year they got us chairs because we didn't have any chairs after the fire. We really needed them. So real practical kind of things.
Yeah, I mean the fire department. Every year the fire department gets some sort of grant basically from them for usually. They do a great job, and the other fire department in town does, and the rescue squad. They do a great job helping out with people in our community.
So I had lost a sweatshirt. I couldn't find a sweatshirt, and it wasn't a big deal, but
it's funny that you were losing laundry. I'm the one who's always like,
for some reason I lost a sweatshirt, and I was kind of bummed about it. And I was out and about in the community, and I actually saw somebody wearing my sweatshirt, and I knew it was there were some things about it that I knew were.
You can say it. There was stains and no. I'm kidding. There was not stains.
I saw her wearing my sweatshirt, and I was like, "Oh, bummer! I totally donated that. Didn't realize I donated it." So you know that you live in a small town when you see someone else wearing your sweatshirt.
And now if you're someone who's local and listening to this podcast, and you're roughly Kathleen's size, you're thinking, "Did I buy Kathleen?" And you bought a sweatshirt ever at Thrifty Attic. You're like, "Did I buy Kathleen's sweatshirt?" You'll have to that's just going to be a mystery here. I will never tell who it might have gone to.
We really appreciate you spending the time with us for season 1 of the podcast. If you found this encouraging, we would love for you to share it with your friends or other colleagues that you think might benefit from this. Also, if you could give us a rating on wherever you listen to this, that would be helpful in getting other people to find us. And one last plug for the Rural Renewal Summit coming up in just, I think it's this week. Yeah, it's this week. Yes. So we are so excited about it, and we hope that you'll join us for that.
Yep, it's the 21st and 22nd of April, just in case you were running the actual dates. And we're excited. We hope to see you there.
Rural Renewal Podcast is a part of the Rural Renewal Summit, an initiative of Fresh Expressions happening April 21st and 22nd. The summit is a 2-day digital event exploring new possibilities for small town churches. Learn more at freshexpressions.com/Rural Renewal Summit.
Fresh Expressions is a worldwide movement of everyday missionaries who want to see churches thrive in the places we live, eat, work, and play, by leveraging the creativity and endurance of the inherited church. To learn a simple 5-phase process for starting a new expression of the church that works in small towns, big cities, and everywhere in between, go to freshexpressions.com/how-to-start.
To connect with this podcast, you can email us at podcasts@freshexpressions.com. Rural Renewal Podcast is hosted by Kathleen Blackie and Chris Blackie. It is edited by Joel Limbowen and produced by Kathleen Blackie and Chris Morton. Our North American director is Dr. Christopher Backert.
If you've learned something or have been encouraged by this podcast, please help us spread the word. You can give us a review on Apple Music or Spotify and share this episode on social media.
Let us end with this prayer for town and rural area from the Book of Common Prayer. Lord Christ, when you came among us, you proclaimed the kingdom of God in villages, towns, and lonely places. Grant that your presence and power may be known throughout this land. Have mercy upon all of us who live and work in rural areas, and grant that all the people may give thanks to you for food and drink and all other bodily necessities of life. Respect those who labor to produce them, and honor the land and the water from which these good things come. All this we ask in your holy name. Amen.